for our audience. Thanks for joining in. We are here today with Professor Ricardo, a renowned director and researcher at the EAI, or Northeastern Institute of Experiential AI. And we're going to be discussing responsible AI and many more topics as well. So thank you, Professor, for joining in. And we're going to be starting by a brief introduction of you. Who are you? What are you doing? And what is your interest currently?
Thank you, Anthony, for the invitation for this conversation. So, as you said, I'm the Director of Research of the Institute for Experential AI at Northeastern University. Northeastern University is mainly, the main campus is in Boston, but they have 13 campuses all around 3 countries, and I'm in the Silicon Valley campus near San Jose, California. So we have a team of like 30 researchers. I manage about 2/3 of them, mainly the people doing responsible AI, also generative AI, and also people doing applications of AI to health. But also we have 2 other teams working on life sciences and AI applied to climate and sustainability. I'm a computer scientist. I did my PhD a long time ago in Canada.
Yeah.
And I have on search, on data mining, many different kinds of algorithms, and now I'm working mainly in responsible AI, which is my main interest these days. Originally, okay. I'm from Chile, so from South America, but I now have been 10 years in the US.
Okay, great. So that was a great introduction, and you have taken us to many places from North America to Chile and a bunch of 13 campuses as well worldwide. So our next question would be regarding your paper, which is titled, by the way, you have many publications. So we're going to be, sorry, we're going to be inserting it. Listeners can join in and read more. So can you briefly describe your paper, Bias in the Web? What was the intention behind doing that research, and a brief description of the results and the implications you noticed?
Yeah, this is my one of my most cited paper, also my most recent papers. Yeah. And basically, at some point, I realized, I think it was in 2016, I realized that I have been working on bias in systems in many different ways. And that was a common topic, but it took me a few years to realize that the common topic was bias. So I started in 2008 with one of my PhD students looking at bias in search. Then we look with another PhD student on bias in content in the web, and so on, a bias on how people produce content. And then I said, well, the bias is something that is related to the whole process of content in the web, and then decided to do this paper. But I first started with, usually I first started giving talks on the topic, because when you talk about it, the topic starts to crystallize, and also you start seeing what are the weaknesses that what you need to complete. And then finally I had the full vicious cycle of bias in the web. So basically you have first bias in data, then you have bias on how people interact with data. That mainly is basically called engagement bias. So here you have that very few people put new content, and people interact with the content, but most people is just looking. They're lurkers, as Nielsen would say. And then we have algorithmic bias. So these are the bias of the algorithms itself, and there is a lot that algorithmic bias in the interaction of people with systems. For example, when we have this feedback loop between the system and the users, we get things like exposition bias, and then popularity bias, and and a lot of things that, for example, are very common in recommender systems and then affects e-commerce. The truth is that all e-commerce in the world is very unfair, but no one notices because the platforms have a big revenue, but there are many sellers in the long tail of the distribution that maybe are losing a lot of money and they're dying, but no one notices because you never see them in a search or when you're looking for a product. And then I do the feedback loop of
coming
people
to before
using.
Sorry for interrupting. Before heading into the description of feedback loops, can you mention examples of these companies? No changing because of that's what makes money for them, specifically in e-commerce, as you mentioned, because basing it on examples would allow us to understand it in more concrete manner. So, what are some of the examples you noticed in this bias in the web regarding the actual companies operating?
Yeah, the examples are all of them. So starting with Amazon, AliExpress, all system, because it's not a problem of bad intentions. It's a problem that the way we design the systems. For example, if you have only 2-3 recommendations, you only will be able to see 2-3 products. But when you see only 3, 4, 10 products, and there are 1,000 possibilities, well, you are not seeing anything. What I say is you are not seeing, it's not even the tip of the iceberg. You are seeing just the ice cube on the top of the iceberg. You are seeing so little, and you can only click there that popularity bias will appear, even if you don't want to. So the solution will be to also be clicked. So it's a very hard trade-off, and there's not way to do it. So you can do some exploration, but I believe you need to do more exploration, and companies are not doing that.
Yeah. So this is a perfect segue to come back to the next point, because if we are watching only the content that is promoted by the algorithm, by the capitalist market, or the customers' behavior changes accordingly. So it's a feedback loop of wanting something because the algorithm wants you to want that something. So can we?
Yeah. So the feedback loop has two variants.
Yeah.
One is basically the system using your data to personalize your experience. Yeah. So, for example, personalization makes these things even worse, because now you will see only a subset of these things that you can see in general, and that is what is called the famous filter bubble. That basically you are encapsulated in only your taste and only the thing that the system believes you like, but you will never see something that maybe you will love because you don't know it. So this is why it's so important to do correlative filtering, because correlative filtering breaks a little bit that bubble. So basically, at least breaks your bubble. Now, the truth is that the system is itself in a much bigger bubble that is the union of all the bubbles of the people, and that is much harder to break because you don't have data to go out of the bubble. So the metaphor I use there is this movie. Now I don't remember the name, but it was a person that was inside a big bubble, living a fake life. And sometimes I feel that many people is living a fake life, and they don't want to get out of there because they think they are fine. So there are many science fiction movies where people is encapsulated in this world, and they don't want to get out. Maybe Matrix is another example of that, where most people they don't know they're sleeping, well, they're living like not even, something real.
Ready Player One depicts the same thing, where the main actor is in virtual reality world. But that movie in particular is different in a way that it eventually breaks. I mean, most of the movies portraying these kinds of events eventually tries to try to pass the idea that this is no normal, and the actors themselves are retaliating that system. So hopefully we would be on that route peacefully, but if not, by whatever means necessary, because this filter bubble is more pronounced in real world, be it politics, be it in educational institutions. Having these kinds of filter bubbles makes you uncritical of other ideas, or else unaware of your own biases as well. So this, as you said, would reach to another feedback loop that would eventually strengthen the very system you're trying to oppose. So it was an
second, there's another part of the feedback loop is important, is what you do with the data you get. For example, you can get data from the web, and then let's say you write a blog post. So you write a new blog post, but typically to do that, people will search. Let's say you want to write about filter bubble, you search about it, and you write a nice blog using content from other people, and then you put your name because it's your blog, and then you publish that back into the web. So what is the problem with that? That will reinforce the belief of the search engine that the top content of the web is the best. So there's one bias on the clicks. People click more on the top positions because they are in the top positions. But also, if you are putting back content, you're reinforcing the ranking function, and then this content will have more relevance. So basically, you are making the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And this is a typical process in human life, not only in the web, but also in economy and in many other things. So this one is much more difficult to fix because it's like a second order bias. It's basically you are reinforcing the ranking function of the search engine.
Yeah, as you mentioned, because everything humanity is making is out of the one behavior of humanity. So that would be also reflected in the products we make, in the engagements we create. So this is the basic premise of the paper, and hopefully you'd read the entire paper. We're going to be linking it in the bio. So any last word regarding the bias in the web, and how could someone like us, even students, they're going to be graduating, they're going to be publishing papers, they're going to be interacting with this content the most. So what is your advice in order to at least minimize their vulnerability to these kinds of biases? And what are the practical steps to take in order to combat this?
Yeah, this is not an easy question. I think there's no complete answer to that question, but the first thing is awareness. So if we are aware of this bias, so for example, if you read my paper and understand all these biases I mentioned, from data, from algorithms, from interaction, from the feedback loop, you at least will try to mitigate in your code those biases. A recent paper, like 2-3 years ago, showed even that the bias of the programmers gets transferred to the code. So this is even more complicated because you may not realize that the way you code is also affecting the system. I joke, but maybe it's true that if a group of women do a recommended system, maybe that system will be much more empathic than a system than my men, because maybe the one that my men will be focused on revenue and not focus on user experience. Because this is a typical tension between having a user experience and getting more money. And at the end, you need to have both to be successful, because otherwise, if you don't have a user experience, people don't come, and then you don't survive. But if you don't have revenue also, you don't survive. So it's not trivial to optimize both things at the same time. And I will say, if you try to be just all the time, for example, let's say you have 1,000 sellers in your platform. Let's say you have an e-commerce, or you have 1,000 products that you are selling. The question is, what is the right amount of exposition that each one has to have, so to be fair to them? So if you can solve that problem, which is not easy to solve, it's a multi-optimization problem. then at least you are being fair with all the products you are selling, and then that will be good for the system. Will be very healthy market. However, the question is, will that healthy market be also sustainable? So will you get enough revenue being fair? And this is something that is it's a problem that we have in other aspects of life. For example, you can say we should have all the people with the same opportunity to education, right? For example, university is a typical example of that. But the question is, can that be sustained? Like almost all countries cannot have all the people at universities because it cannot afford it. So this is not a problem that is only computer science, it's a problem of society, and we still don't solve it after so many years.
Interesting points. You have shared practical advice, especially the awareness side of things. At least every time you're aware of your biases, you would make a conscious effort of changing your ways. Coming to you, adding to another example of women in power making the right decisions. In the 2008 global financial crisis, there was a bank in Europe, the only bank that didn't collapse or need a financial bailout from the government, which is run and operated by all women. So when they got interviewed into why that was the case, they said that if we don't understand it, we wouldn't risk our own and our investors' money as well. So these kinds of approaches can be translated into the product we build. So working on the human side of things is also an effective way of combating these biases. So it's another example to add to your arsenal.
Yes, for example, in your development team, so in your programming team, you should have diversity of all things, not gender, ethnicity, maybe different disciplines. So diversity also helps to be more aware of these biases.
Exactly. So even our team is mostly women, and you can notice that the decisions are different because in the products we build, we don't necessarily go right into the performance, the language. We go to the user of things. So what would the user be benefited in? If this educational platform could be adjusted like this, how much more people could be accommodated in like this? So the whole narrative and the whole requirement of that project changes. So that's necessary. And for the audience listening out there, make your team diverse to be exposed to diverse thoughts. And hopefully that will introduce a positive bias to be translated into product as well. And hopefully we discussed the majority of the paper, and additional reading would be posted as well. So our next question would be, what is experiential AI, and does it have a relation with responsible AI and the core task of the Institute of Experiential AI as well? So if you could discuss these points.
Yeah, so Northeastern was the first, had an idea more than 100 years ago that was to allow people that didn't have enough money to go to the university, because this is a private, it's a non-profit university, but it's a private university in Boston, and you have MIT, Harvard, you have also other expensive universities there. So they thought about the following idea, which is now it's called the co-op program. So basically, every year, one of the quarters, the person will work in a company, will gain experience. That's why it's experiential AI. Gain experience, and at the same time, in these 3 months, let's say you have a summer internship, you will earn enough money to basically pay your studies for the next year. And this was the idea. So when a student goes to Northeastern, at the end of the 4 years of any career, you will have like 1 year of experience in work. So that's one of the advantage when you want also to look for a job, because you already know a lot of things. So we wanted to, and I think that goal is in everything the university does, and that's why when in 2021 the university started this institute, they decided to call it Experiential AI, because we want to have AI that works in practice and that is responsible in praxis. And this is the relation between experiential and responsible. So you need to be responsible to be experiential. So we have a team of responsible AI, and we have a responsible AI practice, which is the experiential part of that. And we are helping companies on how to put responsible AI in operations. So that means AI ethics principles, that means responsible AI governance, responsible data governance, and means basically the right fairness rules inside your processes, and also means all the human processes related to understanding how to put responsible AI in place. That means what executives need to know, what managers need to know, and what engineers need to know. So we need to do training on all these levels so people use it well. One thing we have found working with the top companies in the US is that they understand the principles. So, for example, they understand what it means transparency. Let's say one of the key principles of responsible AI, but they really don't know how to put them in operation. So, like, yeah, I know what is transparency, but what it means when I'm building a product, what it means when I'm programming something, and then we help them to be transparent. For example, in the world of generative AI, the first transparency measure is that any user should know that it's not talking to a person, but it's talking to a chatbot, for example. Sometimes that's not clear. And you need to ask certain questions to understand that you are not talking to a human. So all these things are important. Now, if you are too transparent, this is also maybe dangerous, because if you are completely public, some person may game your system. Yeah. But on the other hand, if you have a completely black box, I think that's not good, because then no one can basically check what you are doing, and you may be doing wrong things, and you need to share enough information so another person can audit your system.
Yeah, great.
Especially, so this is the experiential AI part and responsible AI part.
I mean, your work is very important in that it makes or set the standards that has to be met practically. So each company doesn't have to have these kinds of very highly specialized people to work on this. So they could come into you and consult you about the right manners in order to implement the principles they are preaching. So this is a very exciting opportunity, not only for companies, but for startups too. Can you give me examples of or a memory from one company that you helped in this regard? And how was the experience? What did you learn? What did that company learn? And how would you advise future startups that are coming in to engage in that practice as well?
Yeah, sadly, all these engagements are confidential, so I cannot name any company. But I can mention that, for example, we have worked with finance companies, with telcos, with, for example, health insurance, and there we did a very interesting audit. Also, yeah, these are the main engagements we had. So instead, I would say I would recommend the ACM principles. I'm one of the two main authors of the ACM principles, the new one that appeared in 2022 principles. And I would like to stress the first one, because the first one is like my little baby, because I pushed that principle in the committee, is legitimacy and competence. So before you do anything on the idea you have, you need to do first an impact assessment, social impact assessment of your idea. For example, what will be the possible benefits and what will be the possible harms of the system? And if you show that the benefit is much larger than the harms, these are like vaccines, like COVID vaccines. Yeah. Some people may be affected, but most people will be safe. If you do that, and this is similar to like environmental impact assessment, something that is now compulsory in many countries. So the same should be true for AI, that basically will affect the life of people, like in education, in medicine, and so on. And after you do that, you need to show that you have the right competence. And the right competence is not only the technical competence, but it's also that you have expertise on the domain of the problem. So if you are doing application to health, you need to have doctors involved. You cannot do it yourself.
Yeah.
And very important, also you need to have the administrative competence, because some cases people have done things that they didn't have the permission to do. Like you need to have the authorization to do something, but sometimes people don't ask. They say, "Can I do this?" No, they say, "Oh, this is a great idea," and they do it.
Yeah.
The best example happened in France, where two schools decided to put video cameras to use facial recognition, basically for security. And then some parents took them to court. And then the court said that that was illegal for three reasons. One was related to privacy. Basically, according to data protection, you need to have, in a public space, you need to have the consent of people. And it's impossible to have the consent of people in a public space. It's not enough to say you are being watched, you are giving your consent. No, it has to be explicit. And of course, you cannot do that. Second, very interesting was that the solution was not proportional to the problem. So if you want security, put a guard so it's very interesting, put a guard in the door. So I don't think that was a legal reason, but it was interesting that they mentioned that. But the third one is that they didn't have the permission because they never asked and they never checked. And in that part of France, the schools belongs to the city. So only the mayor of the city could decide to put the cameras. And then that was another reason was illegal, because they did something that they were not supposed to do. So it's interesting that these small things then cause this problem, because you will expect that maybe the director said, "Of course I can decide. I don't need to ask anyone." But due to the complicated law that you have in some places, they had to ask. And probably the mayor will say, "No, this will be a problem. This will be like a bad public relations," and they were. So they had a public
eventually.
relations eventually, yes.
Yeah, so interesting. We dived in from northeastern to France. So
yes, we're in a global world, and AI reaches everyone, because reaches anyone with internet, and I think that will be related to the next question.
Yeah, it is. Because one of the next questions would be discussing about democratization of AI. And referring back to your previous points, yeah, nobody asks for permissions, because if you ask, you have to fulfill a lot of legal rules. You have to check in with a lot of companies, and that would eventually makes you critical of, okay, I'm doing this, so I have to do this. So you would implement safeguards on your product as well. But this lack of transparency or over freedom of some tech companies is leading us to this, because there are features rolled in and users sign up just because nobody asked for permissions. And even before scheduling this interview, we had two services from OpenAI. One of it is Sora, and Google recently introduced its Bard with Gemini. So all these services are being handed out freely for anyone with a Google account. So basically, they are consenting without reading. So do you think AI should be democratized? And if so, are we doing it in the right manner?
Yeah, so I don't like this word, democratize.
Yeah.
Because it's in some sense, it's a false wish. So, for example, when we say AI will democratize, and we always said, for example, that the internet will democratize information, but still we have 35% of the people in the planet that don't have access to internet. That is not something that will say good or bad. That's reality. I always joke that these people that don't have internet have something that we lost, which is something I would like to have again, is privacy. So we don't have privacy, they have privacy because they are not connected to internet. Exactly. But when we say that, for example, let's say the service that you mentioned, like Google services or OpenAI services through Microsoft these services can only be used by the people with internet. But also they don't work in all languages. And they're like 15% of the world don't speak the languages that, for example, are supported by OpenAI. So of course, there's an overlap between the people without internet and that don't speak these languages. But if you add also, for example, all the children that don't use internet yet, and in Africa, that's a huge majority of people, like people less than, say, 8 years old, is a big part of the population. And then you add in Europe and Japan and countries that have a very old population, all the people that doesn't have internet because they are too old to learn, or they don't want to learn. If you put all these people together, this is more than half of the population on Earth. And then when you say I'm democratizing AI, no, I'm thinking, no, what you are doing is you are increasing the digital gap between this half of the population that have access to these services with respect to the other half that don't have access to these services. So you are democratizing only half the population. So for me, that's more like the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer again. And this is my problem. So I prefer not to fool myself and not to talk about democratizing. What we need to do is to try to go, for example, in Africa, and we have a person from Nigeria in our team working on this. For example, also doing it in languages that are not were supported, like a low-level resource language. I think OpenAI ChatGPT supports close to 100 languages. Most people don't know that we have 7,100 languages alive. So basically, there are 7,000 languages that are not supported. 50% of the people talk. I did the exercise, I completed myself because I couldn't find this answer because it depends on the languages that are supported. So how we can extend to, let's say, 1,000 more languages, and then we will get to 90%, not to 75, not to, let's say, to 90, 95%, not to 85%. So this is one thing. How we can extend internet connectivity to other places of the world that don't have it. But at the same time, when people talk about the digital rights, my digital right number 0, not number 1, number 0, is people have the right to be not digital. So, for example, that means that a person in a country has the right to talk to a person and doesn't need to do everything through internet, because that is happening today in many countries. Like if you want to do something, you need to use internet, and if you don't have internet, or if you, for example, don't want to use it because you are too old to learn, or even maybe you have another problem like some discapacity or something that doesn't allow you to use internet, you are lost, and this is very unfair. So I would say this is the right number 0. You want to be human, and human means originally no internet.
Yeah, exactly. Because in this digital age, it is constantly advertised or promoted that going digital is a privilege to have, but it's a right not to have it as well. Because for you to use a service, you have to have your data mined through these companies. It doesn't make sense, because these incentive systems that are laid by different corporations have incentivized us to give our data for free, but advertising that they give their services for free as well, because there are always hidden costs. Nothing is for free in these capitalist corporations, but this is the kind of insights that being aware would bring. So this is your stance on forced democratization of AI, because the word even doesn't make sense, because it's not a basic thing to have or to have not. So even the terminology doesn't make sense to describe the matter as well. So this was the questions I had for today, and any insights you want to add, any ventures or any advice you want to give our audience, this is the time to do it.
Thank you, Anthony. So one thing I would like to mention based on your question is that and in some sense you already said it, but I will reinforce it. You need to be aware of your biases. That's the only way to be better. So you need to And the problem is that bias is a hidden process. So you are not aware until someone tells you that, for example, a word is a bias by itself. For example, in English, there are many examples. For example, you have in English, there's another case. There was a sad case of this woman that was basically charged of manslaughter because of a Uber car. And she was the backup driver, and she didn't react in time because she was not putting attention. And then the car basically killed another woman. But for example, for me, it's kind of a paradox that the woman is charged by manslaughter because manslaughter should be only for men, right? It's in the word. But we are using these things, and many people say men when they want to say humans. Or for example, gender bias is encoded in the language, and I don't know how much gender bias is encoded in your language. I don't know if you speak.
Yeah, I can speak for my language as well, because in Amharic, almost all of the verbs are masculine. So yeah, a default example you're gonna be learning even from primary grade upward, it said no, and these kinds of terminologies are also embedded in the language.
Yeah, and in some languages, for example, in Spanish or in German, every object has a gender. And for example, an interesting example is that in Spanish, a bridge is masculine, and in German, a bridge is feminine. So if you ask a person to describe the bridge, normally in Spain, they will talk about how strong is the bridge. But in Germany, they will say how beautiful is the bridge. Because the gender that you are using changes the way you're thinking. So if we can be aware of these small things every time we say things, we will be better people. And also that's related to your ethics. So I would say you need to be aware of your ethics because there's a lack of ethics around the world in politics, in relations between countries, in economy. So like, for example, one thing is to be capitalist, another thing is to be hyper-capitalist. I mean, 100 million is enough. Why you need 100 billion? And there's some people in our field that are talking about trillions. And yeah. This doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, when Sam Altman said that he wanted to do
2.7
a new, like 10 trillion factory for doing new chips. Well, you know, the value, the GDP of Taiwan, which is the main producer of chips, is only 4 trillion. So it's much cheaper to buy Taiwan if you want to do that. Like these things don't make sense.
Yeah.
Do you understand the numbers that you're mentioning? I think it's just kind of a
this endless goal of pursuing more and not saying enough. So not satisfying with exactly. What you have. Yeah, it's a big deal because even
so my go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You are the guest.
No, I guess my last message will be, if you all want to do an AI product, think how you can empower people instead of how to earn a lot of money and replace people. So we need to use AI to be our partners, not to be our replacements. And if we do that, there will not be any discussion about the future of work, because that be part of the goal. The goal is to increase our productivity, make us better, not to basically reduce cost by replacing humans with machines.
Yeah, exactly. Because some things are more important than profits. Although the data might not support that, some things are definitely important than profits. So this was our interview. Personally, I got these 3 points. First, be aware not only of your own biases, but also being aware of what is happening in the world. So educating yourself in different fields will make you less vulnerable to being advertised to. That means the person who knows multiple ways in which he or she can be hurt would be less vulnerable as well. So the second point I would like to address for our viewers or listeners is empowering people in your field, no matter who. It could be your parents, your siblings, anyone that needs to be that needs a push to be aware of his or her biases, or in every job market, try to bring that inclusion as well. So empowering people in that regard. And finally, during your presentation in ASLU, the first time I met Professor Ricardo, you mentioned that where if we only realize that we only need only the 10 human rights, we don't need any rights as well, any to remember or to speculate about different financial, economical, health laws as well. Only following these 10 human rights are sufficient to be to address all of the issues in the world. So we don't need to complicate things. Things are simple if you want them to be simple. So that was the point I got from that session. And I got interesting insights from this session as well. So thanks, Professor, for highlighting this. And you are, okay, you are taking notes, I guess. Thanks again.
So I put everything together. So thanks a lot, Anthony, for this nice interview.
Thanks again for sharing and dedicating your time as well. So this was it, and you can put the recording now.